we go live on the Be Live platform, transmitting it over to Fascist Book, one of the infamous shadow banning and deplatforming services here on the internet. You can see in the headline today, the title of the show today, even though Bill Gates and Tony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci, are totally and dangerously full of shit, they do deserve their right to speak freely, right? Their right to free speech should not be infringed. The same standard should apply to all people. What's up, fam? It's me, your boy Max Mogren, reporting live for you from beautiful Alpine, Wyoming. This is Wake Up Wyoming. It's May 4th, 2020, Cinco de Mayo tomorrow. May Day recently, a lot of protests around the country and around the world on May Day. Let's get into the show. We got a big show today. Thank you all for tuning in. As usual, just so you know, if you want the news without having to put up with me and my incessant wordiness, my talky, all my personal opinions, which I share here, head on over to ricefarmer.blogspot.com. This man, former U.S. Army intelligence agent who lives in the countryside of Japan, growing rice, living off the land, and researching quite a bit all day, every day, keeps me on my toes, keeps me busy, giving me the most timely and, in my opinion, reputable information I can find, all from relatively mainstream sources, so people can't really critique it. What's up, Nicole? What's up, Susan? Let me know where you guys are coming from. We're talking free speech today, and the reason I'm getting in on this, we saw those doctors from Bakersfield, the accelerated urgent care doctors, censored by YouTube. We saw David Icke censored by YouTube. Both of these videos, I shared David Icke's London Real videos. I thought he made some really good points in there. I don't agree with everything he says, but I don't agree with everything most people say. But everybody should have the right to speak freely and share their opinions. Even folks like Dr. Fauci and Billy Gates, the unelected billionaire philanthropist who stands to profit billions of dollars if he has his way and gets mandatory global vaccinations brought online. Fuck you, Bill. Fuck you, Bill. Fuck you, Bill. But I do respect your right to speak freely. I just wish they wouldn't give you such a huge platform to share your crazy depopulation agendas, Billy Gates. But you have a right to speak freely, as should all of us. And this is a great article, Caitlin Johnson. I'm going to read you this whole one. Why you should oppose the censorship of David Icke. Hint, it's got nothing to do with Icke. Within 48 hours, both Facebook and then YouTube have deleted the accounts of David Icke for posting content that disputes the existence and transmission of COVID-19 as described by the World Health Organization and the National Health Services. Again, the largest donor to the World Health Organization is Bill Gates. Other platforms may soon fall in suit, as they did with Alex Jones in 2018. This article is not about David Icke. I will say that again in italics for the especially dense. This article is not about David Icke. This article is about why we shouldn't be okay with monopolistic, billionaire-owned Silicon Valley tech giants with extensive ties to U.S. government agencies controlling human communication. Caitlin tells us she knows next to nothing about David Icke and has done exactly zero research into his views for this article. For all I know, he's every bit the raving lunatic the narrative managers say he is. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we're seeing a consistent and accelerating pattern of powerful plutocratic institutions collaborating with the U.S. centralized empire to control what ideas people around the world are permitted to share with each other. And it's a very unsafe trajectory. Making this conversation about Icke and his views distracts from the very important topic we need to actually focus on discussing. Journalist Matt Taibbi recently wrote an excellent essay about the dangers inherent in the increased demand we've seen for more censorship and deplatforming during the coronavirus pandemic, correctly arguing that more authoritarian control over the ideas people are allowed to discuss is vastly more dangerous than the ideas themselves. And I would add, censorship vastly more dangerous than the coronavirus itself, a virus with at least a 99% survival rate. The people who want to add a censorship regime to a health crisis are more dangerous and more stupid by leaps and bounds than a president who tells people to inject disinfectant, Taibbi writes. It's astonishing that they don't see this. Instead of asking calmly if hydroxychloroquine works, or if the less restrictive Swedish crisis response has merit, or questioning why certain statistical assumptions about the seriousness of the crisis might have been off, we're denouncing the questions themselves as infamous, says Taibbi. Taibbi argues against the increasingly normalized trend of elevating authoritative content while silencing other content which does not wear that magical label in an attempt to fight disinformation. If you examine which content is considered authoritative, you'll find a bunch of outlets who have consistently lied to the world about war after war, who spent years promoting the baseless conspiracy theory that Vladimir Putin had infiltrated and secured control over the executive branch of the US government, who consistently normalized the status quo, which is wholly incompatible with the surviving and thriving of life on this planet. Google, who now owns YouTube, has been financially intertwined with U.S. intelligence agencies since its very inception, when it received research grants from the CIA and NSA for mass surveillance. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg has called on the government to take a more active role in regulating harmful content and has been actively collaborating with government agencies and government-funded think tanks to decide which content to remove. Social media executives are now routinely called before government hearings and lectured about the need to increase censorship under the implicit threat of antitrust cases being brought to bear. These massive corporations now consistently censor with an extreme bias against governments which refuse to bow to the demands of the US government and its allies. We're going to get into that later in the show today, taking a good look at the situation in Venezuela. I'm not sure if anybody's seen it yet, but there was a recent coup attempt by a security contractor based in Florida. We're going to get into that at the end of the show. Back to the article. In 2017, representatives of Facebook, Twitter, and Google were instructed on the U.S. Senate floor that it is their responsibility to quell information rebellions and adopt a mission statement expressing their commitment to prevent the fomenting of discord. Civil wars don't start with gunshots. They start with words, the representatives were told. America's war with itself has already begun. We must all act now on the social media battlefield to quell information rebellions that can quickly lead to violent confrontations and easily transform us into the divided states of America. Okay, that's a quote from the U.S. Senate floor. Whenever anyone objects to censorship on these massive platforms, they're always told that those platforms are private companies who are free to do what they like on their private property. But how private is a corporation that is interlaced with government power with increasing inseparability? The reality is that in a corporatist system of government with vanishingly few meaningful distinctions between corporate power and state power, corporate censorship is state censorship. Proponents of increased internet censorship have already openly conceded this point. A recent Atlantic article by two legal professors, subtitled "In the Debate Over Freedom versus Control of the Global Network," China was largely correct. Okay. I don't want to go the way of China. And the US was wrong. The case is made that Western internet censorship will necessarily involve a collaboration with private corporations and government power. As surprising as it may sound, digital surveillance and speech control in the United States already show many similarities to what one finds in authoritarian states such as China. The article's authors favorably argue constitutional and cultural differences mean that the private sector, rather than the federal and state governments, currently takes the lead in these practices, which further values and address threats different from those in China. But the trend toward greater surveillance and speech control here and toward the growing involvement of government is undeniable and likely inexorable. Apart from the fact that they are here claiming that increasingly authoritarian speech control is good and necessary, these two bootlickers are absolutely correct. Human communication is indeed being controlled using the so-called private sector to circumvent constitutional limitations which prohibit the government from censoring speech directly. These Silicon Valley tech corporations have ensured their continued monopolistic dominance by demonstrating their willingness to collaborate with establishment power structures. So there are no platforms of anywhere near the same size and influence that people can move to if they don't feel like letting government-tied plutocrats police what thoughts are permitted to enter into their minds. This has given this corporate government alliance the ability to control the thoughts that people are allowed to share, discuss, and think about in the same way totalitarian governments can, with the false mask of freedom plastered over it. A truly free being does not need an alliance of plutocrats and government agencies to protect their mind from David Icke. A truly free being does not want an alliance of plutocrats and government agencies to exercise any control whatsoever over what ideas they are permitted to share and what thoughts they are permitted to think. A truly free being opposes with all their might any attempt to lock in a paradigm where human communication and thereby thought is controlled by vast, unaccountable power structures which benefit from the absence of dissent. Be a truly free being. Oppose this intrusion into your mental sovereignty. Powerful words from Caitlin Johnstone. Looking at censorship, it's funny here in the article she talks about authoritarian or authoritative voices somewhere in here. It's in there. And interestingly, if you go, early in the show, I was saying Bill Gates and Tony Fauci, totally and dangerously full of shit, but their right to free speech should be protected. Event 201, pandemic exercise, coronavirus dry run in New York, October 2019. Recommendation number 7 to come out of Event 201 was this. Governments and the private sector should assign a greater priority to developing methods to combat mis- and disinformation prior to the next pandemic response. Governments will need to partner with traditional and social media companies. So this adds a lot of weight to what Caitlin's saying there. Billy Gates, Event 201, calling for the merger of state and corporate power, the essence of techno-fascism for censorship. Governments will need to partner with traditional and social media companies to research and develop nimble approaches for countering misinformation. This will require developing the ability to flood media with fast, accurate, and consistent information. Public health authorities should work with private employers and trusted community leaders, such as faith leaders, to promulgate factual information to employees and citizens. Trusted, influential private sector employers who create the capacity to readily and reliably augment public messaging, manage rumors and misinformation, and amplify credible information to support emergency public communications. National public health agencies should work in close collaboration with who? The WHO. Who's the biggest funder of the WHO? That's Billy Gates. Fuck you, Bill Gates. Fuck you. Fuck your billions. Fuck your World Health Organization. And fuck your mandatory vaccines. Also, fuck your censorship. To create the capability to rapidly develop and release consistent health messages. For their part, media companies should commit to ensuring that authoritative messages are prioritized and that false messages are suppressed, including through the use of technology. So, fuck you, Bill Gates. Fuck you, WHO. Fuck you, Facebook. And fuck anybody that tries to take away my platform, tries to censor my speech. That's all I got to say about that. In this situation, China is being held up as being, oh, if we had only acted more like China, we'd be okay. Well, in China, they locked down journalists. China journalist jailed as free speech clampdown intensifies, published on May 1st. And this guy is not some independent journalist. This guy he was a journalist who had worked for some of China's most powerful propaganda outlets, has been jailed for 15 years after being accused of attacking the ruling Communist Party, court documents showed. The sentence handed down to Chen Jiren is one of the harshest moves yet against free speech by China's government under President Xi Jinping, who has muzzled the press and ordered Chinese media outlets to serve the ruling Communist Party's interests. So there we go. Chen, former journalist with communist mouthpiece People's Daily, was convicted Thursday of picking quarrels and provoking trouble, extortion, illegal business operations, and bribery, a court in central Hunan province said in a statement posted online. The charge of picking quarrels and provoking trouble is a catch-all that Chinese authorities sometimes use against people who criticize the regime. There we go. Everybody's chiming in here. I like this. Yes. Thank you, Kelly Rogers, for speaking freely. Juan Fernandez, thank you for speaking freely. Steve Frank, amen. And Don Machiavelli. Everybody chiming in there. Feels good, doesn't it? You know, I don't know about you, but I don't trust a guy who made his billions by stealing other people's operating systems, making them vulnerable to computer viruses, and then selling antivirus software to protect his shitty, flawed, intentionally susceptible to virus operating system from the viruses that his own company was creating. Okay, Bill Gates is trying to apply the same techno-fascist bullshit to the human race, and we're not buying it. Speaking of China, speaking of the surveillance state, police agencies are using drones to enforce stay-at-home orders, raising concerns among civil rights groups. Okay, this shows drone footage from Chicago. Well, I think that's what it is. I don't know what they're doing here. They play these videos, but point being, now police departments all over the world and here in the USA are using drones to keep an eye on people. Speaking of journalists jailed, let's not forget Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, who is in, I think he's still in solitary confinement, but he's locked in jail. Assange's partner says his life is in danger in London prison, right? Journalists aren't just persecuted, censored, deplatformed, shadow banned, algorithmically unamplified. What's the opposite of amplification? Algorithmically quieted, silenced, whatever. They are also literally locked up in solitary confinement and held for months with no trial. The partner of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange said on Friday his life is in danger while he is held in a London prison during the coronavirus lockdown. Assange is fighting a request by the U.S. to extradite him to stand trial for conspiring to hack government computers and espionage, but hearing scheduled for later this month will not go ahead because of the lockdown. The life of my partner, Julian Assange, is at severe risk. He is on remand at HMP Belmarsh and COVID-19 is spreading within its walls, Stella Morris, who has 2 children with Assange, said in a statement. Julian needs to be released now for him, for our family, and for the society we all want our children to grow up in. Morris, a lawyer, said last month that she met Assange in 2011 at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he spent 7 years avoiding arrest by British police. Assange and WikiLeaks enraged the U.S. government a decade ago by publishing thousands of secret American documents. Assange's supporters see him as a champion of free speech, exposing abuses of power and hypocrisy in Washington. The U.S. authorities say he is wanted not because he embarrassed them, but because he endangered informants, dissidents, and rights activists in several countries, including Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan, by illegal actions. Okay, dissidents and rights activists, I think the government is actually referring to their own CIA operatives. You see the note here, Julian's partner, Stella Morris, is concerned about COVID-19 spreading within the walls of the prison. I'd be more concerned about whatever they're feeding Julian than him being stuck under fluorescent lights all the time, stuck in solitary confinement in a very stressful situation. I wouldn't be so concerned about coronavirus because I don't think Julian, unless his health is dwindling for other reasons, he wouldn't be that susceptible. As evidenced by this study published by Axios on April 26, 2020, 96% of nearly 3,300 inmates with coronavirus were asymptomatic. Okay. 96% of 3,277 inmates in state prison systems who tested positive for the coronavirus did not show symptoms, Reuters reports. Interestingly, they tested 4,693 prisoners, and 3,277 came up positive. Let's get some. I want to do the math on that. I think it's about 70% positive in the prison there, or in the prisons. Oops, what am I doing? Calculator. There's the calculator. Let's see. I want to just run these numbers real quick. 3277 divided by 4693. Little math is always fun. Yeah, so 69.8%, 70% of these inmates had COVID. And of the 70% who had COVID, 96% showed no symptoms. Sounds pretty serious to me, guys. What is this? Selco. I'll read you this one too. This is a time of massive change, and the direction we're going is not good, coming from the organic prepper. Selco, this guy, Selko Begovic, survived in a city under siege in the Balkans during the war there back in the 90s. No power, no water, questionable access to food, militias, armed bands roving in the streets, all that stuff. So he's got some perspective. Let's hear what Selko Begovic has to say, shall we? Where are we now? We are living in a world where fear controls us, or is trying to control us. If we take out all the facts and guesses about the severity of this illness, all that is left is fear, and we are being driven to act by that fear. Among all the fears, fear for health, job, security, the fear of the unknown future is the greatest and most dangerous. We as preppers should live and act by the premise of an unknown future. But when that premise goes worldwide, and when common people start to fear from an unknown future, the whole picture can be different. This whole situation could go in many different directions, but the most probable direction where it will go is not nice. We might be living in times of massive changes. What sort of changes? The individual is nothing. In the name of health, safety, and security, an individual person becomes irrelevant. You or me alone are irrelevant if we are portrayed as, for example, a health hazard or risk for the community. Our rights basically cease to exist. If you are portrayed as, let's say, a terrorist, your rights no longer exist. Not only will you lose your rights, but you will be publicly portrayed as a threat. You will be described in a way that your own neighbors will hunt you down like a rabid animal and then turn you in if you survive. Now, there are times and places and people who deserve to be hunted. There are real terrorists who deserve to be punished. But the point here is who decides who is terrorist or a health risk, and who controls the people, and who makes those decisions. Okay, important to note, what is terrorism? Terrorism is a rule through fear and threats. Well, who's spreading all this fear? That would be the mainstream media. That would be the US government. That would be Bill Gates' World Health Organization and folks like Anthony Fauci, folks who were telling us that millions of Americans were going to die. Folks who took these faulty, flawed numbers coming out of Italy, the so-called 3.4% death rate, based on completely bogus reporting of deaths in Italy, and used it to justify putting the entire world on lockdown. Okay, the real terrorists don't live in caves. They don't drive old Toyotas with machine guns mounted in the back. They don't scream jihad. The real terrorists have billions of dollars, own large corporations, control the media, and real terrorists rule through fear. We are living in times when all that gets blurred together and rushed in the name of security, or in this situation, in the name of public health. I have seen people get quarantined for 28 days in tents without proper food, hygiene, or anything similar, just because someone told authorities they are suspicious and may have the virus. People being separated from their families based on an assumption made from some guy who does not know shit about medicine, and then being put into tents for weeks. And yes, it is unconstitutional, of course, but nobody cares. Okay, it goes on and on. This is a good read. It's important to note, he makes a nice point here about Hitler. Adolf Hitler led his nation, very simplified, from the times of national disaster, huge unemployment, public shame, and general disappointment, to the moments where, under his leadership, a majority of his country approved of the extermination of whole nations by willingly doing it or closing their eyes to it. Okay, it's important to note, Hitler came to power. The Nazi Party, does everybody here know where the Nazi Party was headquartered? Does everybody know where the Nazi Party was founded? Does everybody know where Hitler got all of his money to jumpstart the German economy, to build massive public works programs like the Autobahn network of highways across Germany? Does everybody know where Hitler got all the money? You know, because Germany was broke. That's why Hitler came to power. People were struggling. People were scared. People had a very uncertain future, and they were angry. And well, Hitler showed up, and he had all these great ideas. But well, correction, misspoke there. He had all these fucking crazy ideas, but he also had a whole lot of money that he got from banksters in London and on Wall Street. The original headquarters of the Nazi Party was on Wall Street. The Nazis were really big on eugenics, you know, the master race, depopulating undesirable elements of society. Another guy who was big on the whole eugenics movement was Bill Gates's grandpa. Bill Gates's grandpa, big eugenicist, big Nazi. And then Bill Gates's dad ran Planned Parenthood, big eugenics organization, killing, you know, encouraging people, empowering people to kill their own children if they couldn't afford to have children, right? If they had too much stress, fear, not a stable enough situation in their life to, you know, confidently reproduce, confidently start a family. Billy Gates's dad was happy to help them abort their babies. And now Billy Gates seems like that guy's trying to depopulate the world too. So fuck you, Bill Gates. Looking at the situation, rant over. Whew. Looking at a little economic news, then getting into the public's response. From Houston to New York, America's municipal finances are in tatters. That's right. City's going broke. U.S. public debt increases more in April than during the entirety of 2019. Published on April 28th, or no, May 1st, from the SRS Rocco report, where they take a good look at energy return on investment. There you can see the monthly average increase in the U.S. public debt in the year 2019 was 106 billion. Well, it was 1.287 trillion. So literally over 12 times as much debt added in April 2020 as the average month in 2019. Who's that debt owed to? It's owed to the globalist bankster cartel, a private profit-driven conspiracy that literally loans all money into existence, all modern currencies, aside from, you know, in every country with a private profit-driven central bank, every country that the globalist technocratic cocksucker oligarchs have infiltrated. It's pretty good work if you can find it, where you basically just pull money out of your ass and then charge other people to use it. So that's where the national debt goes to. That's where your taxes go to. Coronavirus pandemic tanks U.S. auto sales in April, published May 1st, 2020. Marriage rates dropped to a record low, according to The Hill, published 4 days ago. Unemployment not looking, well, it's looking unprecedentedly shitty. 30.3 million have filed for unemployment insurance in the last 6 weeks. There's also a backlog, so numbers would be higher. There you can see the total claims in the weeks leading up to and ending on April 25th, 2020. So we're going to have some new figures here pretty soon. But these, you know, over 6 million people filing for unemployment in 1 week. That's about 10 times the previous record number of unemployment claims filed, which was around 600,000 back in 1982. We hit about 600,000 at the height of the financial meltdown in 2008. Now we're seeing week after week after week after week after week after week, 6 weeks now of completely off the charts, absurd increases in unemployment. Who are they going to blame for this? Oh, they're going to blame the coronavirus. But is it really the coronavirus, or is it the response to the coronavirus? Is the virus making people lose their jobs? Are people really afraid of the virus, or are people afraid because the media and deceptive cocksuckers like Bill Gates and Tony Fauci, who are totally and dangerously full of shit, have been terrorizing them for a couple months now, and bringing about these policies that shut down the global economy, basically put the entire world under house arrest, implement a global state of medical martial law. I'm pretty sure that the so-called cure is much worse than the disease with a 99+% survival rate. College grads face one of the bleakest job markets in history. When is my career going to start? Yeah, I feel bad for the kids out there. Japan today, even Japan, all over the world. Just an example, corona poverty spreading and getting worse. Of course, the BBC told us a few weeks ago. I like to keep this statistic on the tip of my tongue because I think it's pretty important. Or rather, it's not a statistic, it's a projection. The virus could push 500 million people into poverty. I'd say that's a low ball. And there's already billions of people living in poverty. But 500 million, if we look at the coronavirus map here, the Johns Hopkins Global Event Doom map, the fear porn map, the completely unreliable and bogus map, which includes probable cases and presumed positive cases in addition to confirmed cases. The map brought to us by an organization, an institution, the Johns Hopkins University, that collaborated with Bill Gates for Event 201. The worst, most scary, most fear-porny statistics they can come up with are a total number of cases worldwide right now of 3,531,000, with total probable, presumed, and confirmed deaths of 248,097. And we know those figures are inflated. We know that in places like Italy, anybody that died with coronavirus had coronavirus listed as their cause of death. We know that here in the United States, you don't even need to get tested for coronavirus to have it listed as your cause of death. We know that there are financial incentives for hospitals and other healthcare providers to list COVID-19 as the cause of death. So we know that these numbers are total bullshit. We know that anybody that cites these numbers as if they are facts, folks like Bill Gates and Tony Fauci, are totally and dangerously full of shit. But point being, 3.5 million people, 3.5 million confirmed cases. The vast majority of those people are not going to die. The vast majority of those people are not even going to have a severe reaction. Even people that do have a severe reaction might be sick, might feel like they got the flu for a week or two, and then they're going to be back to living. They're going to have some natural immunity thanks to the miracle of the human immune system. But literally 150 times more people are forecast to be thrust into extreme poverty by the lockdowns. What does poverty do? Poverty kills. Poverty kills. Poverty kills. Can't say it enough. It's important to know too, while these protests are going on, it's funny, the vast majority of folks have a pretty sensible attitude about these protests that we've been having. This is a sign somebody gave me after they had to leave the protest last week, and I think this one's pretty good. What are we for? Well, we're for our teachers. We're for our healthcare providers. We're for our grieving and our elderly and our sick, and above all else, our community. What are we against? The surrender of freedom. It's pretty simple. Turns out, sitting at home doing the government's dirty work, being a little bitch, giving up your freedoms is some weak ass shit. And I'm done taking shit from anybody that's trying to shame me because I'm questioning the official narrative on what is literally the biggest and most dangerous and absurd, it's laughably absurd, pile of bullshit that I've ever seen in my lifetime. This dwarfs 9/11. Dwarfs 9/11. 9/11, of course, just in case you don't know, it was an inside job. 3,000 Americans, 2,971 Americans died that day, murdered by the deep state, murdered by our own government, murdered by Israeli intelligence, murdered by a bunch of psychopathic, globalist, technocratic terrorists so they could justify and wage an endless war of terror all over the world. Our own government, the United States government, is not only the world's largest drug dealer, which is common with empires throughout human history, right? The British Empire did a very brisk trade in opioids all over the world, just like the US government does a brisk trade in opioids and other illicit drugs right now. Not only the world's largest drug dealer, also, obviously, indubitably, indisputably, the world's largest weapons dealer. Look at the military budget. And I would argue the world's largest terrorist organization. Not having it. Over it. Totally fucking over it. Pieces of shit. Pieces of shit. What are people doing? People are standing up. People are protesting. May 1st, 2020, May Day protests across the U.S. call for reopening and worker protections. Folks all over the world, it's great to see. Should probably keep standing up for our rights because otherwise they're just going to keep stomping all over them. More than 500 protesters gather on the beach to protest California's stay-at-home order. That's good to see. Interestingly, the policies down there in California have been so ridiculous, so absurd that they actually opened the beaches in Newport Beach. There's a guy, Chad Towersley, OC Insta News, who reports on local news. He's kind of a Johnny on the spot local reporter. This isn't him, but this is a guy working with him on this video. Hopefully we see more of this guy, Shane Gang. I'll just mute him and have him going. This is some scenes from the protests in California recently. Shane Gang cracking some jokes. It's kind of cool. He's showing support for the police. This is the future of news reporting, in my opinion, for protest coverage. He's got keeping it energetic for folks, that's for sure. But here you see some scenes from some of these protests. But back to the point I was making, they opened up the beaches in Newport, and then the local media outlets, folks like CNN, local, ABC, CBS, NBC affiliates for Los Angeles, went down to the beaches and broadcast it all over, Southern California, that these few beaches were going to be open. Well, what happened? People who have been cooped up in their houses for months flooded these few beaches, and you had a situation where there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people all crammed into these few beaches. Not good. Maybe we should just reopen the entire planet and let the coronavirus do its thing. One thing you can do to protest, one thing you do to improve your self-sufficiency, get the boot of the man off your system or off your neck, is to get your own garden going. People magazine let us know pandemic gardens are trending. Fears over food shortages lead first-timers to get growing. I'm having a blast growing in the garden this summer. Got a bunch of starters going, building some new beds. Gardening is fun. Gardening gets you back there in contact with the earth. Dig those hands in the dirt. Play with some earthworms. Shovel some horse shit. Gotta love it. If you got any amount of space, get a little garden going. It's a lot of fun. Why are people concerned? Well, Food system's pretty fucked. Nearly 900 workers at Indiana meat plant test positive for coronavirus as food shortage fears grow. Interestingly, if I were to talk about food shortages like the Independent does here, I could get blocked. My videos could be taken down by YouTube, Facebook, and so forth, because apparently you're not allowed to talk about that. Not allowed to talk about that. The impulse to garden in hard times has deep roots. Another little article from The Conversation, where they give you academic rigor and journalistic flair, or so they say. The coronavirus pandemic has set off a global gardening boom. In the early days of lockdown, seed suppliers were depleted of inventory and reported unprecedented demand. Within the U.S., the trend has been compared to World War II victory gardening, where Americans grew food at home to support the war effort and feed their families. The analogy is surely convenient, but it reveals only one piece in a much bigger story about why people garden in hard times. Americans have long turned to the soil in moments of upheaval to manage anxieties and imagine alternatives. My research, this person's research, has even led them to see gardening as a hidden landscape of desire for belonging and connection, for contact with nature, and for creative expression and improved health. So it's fun. Gardening, a lot of fun. It's fun to see those little plants sprout up. It's fun to see food growing. It's even fun to see a deer or a raccoon or whatever out there eating all your lettuce, eating all your kale. It's fun. It's just good fun. Back to food system, wasted milk, euthanized livestock. Photos show how coronavirus has devastated U.S. agriculture. Again, CNBC, get your facts straight. The coronavirus has not devastated agriculture. The response to the coronavirus has devastated agriculture. This one, you guys I've already shared this. The stunning universal testing results from Boston homeless shelter. I covered that the prison results. I thought this one was worth sharing too. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This is old, but still, it's a good little statistic to have in your quiver when you're talking with kooks who think that impoverishing and terrorizing the entire planet is the proper way to deal with a minor disease outbreak. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is now actively looking into results from universal COVID-19 testing at Pine Street Inn homeless shelter. The broad-scale testing took place at the shelter in Boston, South End, a week and a half ago because of a small cluster of cases there. Of the 397 people tested, 146 people tested positive. So about 30-40%. Not a single one had any symptoms. It was like a double knockout punch. The number of positives was shocking, but the fact that 100% of the positives had no symptoms was equally shocking, said Dr. Jim O'Connell. Now, granted, generally speaking, homeless people have very finely tuned and ramped up immune systems because they're living surrounded by germs all the time. But still, doesn't seem like coronavirus is that serious if 100% of 146 people who tested positive in a homeless shelter had no symptoms. White House blocks Fauci from testifying at House coronavirus hearing, published Friday, May 1st. I'm okay with that. I think Fauci's full of shit. He has a right to speak his mind, but I think Fauci should be relegated to the dustbin of history and maybe only allowed to speak on his own personal social media pages, because he has lied to us, he has deceived us, and he has led us into this shit show. Trump calls protesters who carry guns into the Mission Capitol very good people and says the governor should make a deal with them. I don't know about that one, Trumpy. I don't know about these guys. This provides a good example of how old Trumpo is kind of fomenting unrest, right? I don't think it's good to be strapped up when you are living within the confines of the world's largest terrorist organization, arms dealer, and drug dealer. But I don't think you want to be flaunting your weapons, and I don't think you really want to be picking a fight with the world's largest drug dealer, arms dealer, and terrorist organization. So while these guys look really tough, They also kind of make protesters, peaceful, nonviolent, be the change type protesters look a little bit kooky. Probably, there's not really much need to bring your guns to the state capitol unless you're looking for a fight. Bill Gates, fuck you, Bill Gates. Bill Gates says U.S. testing data is bogus because it still takes 3 to 4 days to get results. Okay, Bill, whatever you say, man, because clearly you know everything. Not. Testing data is bogus. It's not really bogus, Bill. You're kind of just full of shit. You're kind of just full of shit, Bill. Kind of just one thing about you, Bill, is you're kind of full of shit. Alarm bells ring over controversial COVID testing. Okay. As we're seeing now, as I covered on the show yesterday, New York State had conducted 15,000 random antibody tests all over the state and found that in the city, New York City, it was 19.9% of people had coronavirus antibodies throughout the entirety of the state. 12.3%, I believe, although here in this article I saw, so they're citing a different study here. They must be, because the most recent study, the study we covered yesterday, had 15,000 participants. In New York, public health officials tested 3,000 residents, while the new study is 15,000. But this is preliminary, 3,000. And big box retailers throughout the state. In New York City, 21% were found to carry the coronavirus antibodies. The data showed close to 13.9% of the population in New York State, about 2.7 million people, had at some point been infected with the coronavirus. Of course, yesterday, if you watched the show, we dug deep into statistics from the bigger study, the 15,000 study that showed, it was on the New York State website. I'll see if I can bring it up. My mom's texting me. Close that. Don't want you seeing my confidential communications with my own mother here. New York antibody testing. Cuomo. Yeah, 15,000. This isn't the article I cited yesterday. About 12% tested positive for COVID-19 antibodies, the largest such study in the nation. Okay. So if we take those numbers and run with them, it was 12.3%, I believe, divide the population in New York by 12.3%, 20 million people in New York State, 12% of that, and then you crunch the numbers and you get a death rate of 0.77%. Of course, that death rate factors in, we don't know what the actual number of people who've died from COVID is, because the death reporting standards have been intentionally fucked up, and hospitals have been incentivized to list COVID as the cause of death. That's just a simple fact. There's no disputing it. But mainstream media is still trying to get us to believe that, any data is controversial. I don't know about that. I'm going to paste this one in. You can read it if you want more. I'm kind of winding down. We're at the 48-minute mark. I'm going to paste that one in for homework. Don't want to bore you too much with that one, but I read it, highlighted some parts that I thought might be worth sharing. I got some good news. The World Health Organization, Bill Gates' big honking non-governmental global mouthpiece, right? The man who provides the most funding to your organization is going to have a bit of sway as to what perspectives your organization puts out. World Health Organization recently told us repeatedly, over and over and over again, rebroadcast across the airwaves all over the planet, that you can catch COVID twice, and there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever that developing antibodies gives you immunity, which we all know is a complete and utter load of horse shit, because that's how the immune system works. If you catch a virus, your body is going to develop an immune response. Your immune system is going to ramp up, and you will have an elevated degree of immunity while you still have those antibodies in your system. And more likely than not, the next time your body is fighting the same or a similar virus, your body's going to be quicker to respond. You're going to have increased immunity. But the World Health Organization just contradicting the basic fundamental completely widely proven and accepted precepts, the basic tenets, the basic principles of the human immune system, the way the world works. Well, we're seeing coming from Sky News, coronavirus. Scientists conclude people cannot be infected twice. Okay. A total of 277 patients in the country were believed to have fallen ill for a second time, as had patients in China and Japan. What country are they referring to? South Korea. A number of reported cases of coronavirus patients relapsing after overcoming the disease were actually due to testing failures, South Korean scientists said. Researchers at the South Korean Center for Disease Control and Prevention now say it is possible for the COVID-19 virus to reactivate in human bodies. Or now say it is impossible for the COVID-19 virus to reactivate in human bodies. There have been more than 10,000 confirmed coronavirus cases in South Korea, with 245 deaths, a 2.3% fatality rate, which is lower than the 3.4% average as stated by the World Health Organization. Okay. Here in the US, we're seeing the death rate is below 1%, despite faulty death reporting practices and financial incentives for struggling hospitals to list COVID as the cause of death. A total of 277 patients in the country were believed to have fallen ill for a second time, as had patients in China and Japan. This prompted concerns that the virus could be mutating so quickly that people were not necessarily immune to catching it again. However, genetic analyses of the virus have not found any substantial changes which would effectively disguise it from the immune system. Got it? Again, you might catch the coronavirus this year. You might catch the coronavirus next year. You might catch it the year after that. Why? Because the coronavirus is a coronavirus, a lot like the common cold. You don't develop lifelong immunity to a coronavirus because you caught it once. Will people, there's so much misinformation, disinformation out there. What's going to happen long term? I don't know. But I do know that if this coronavirus stays the same way it is, it's not really a threat to people that take a remotely halfway decent, do a remotely halfway decent job of taking care of themselves. Moving on. NRA cutting staff and salaries amid coronavirus pandemic. So says ABC News. Kind of a bummer. Again, they're covering these new concerns over the food supply. Just more fear porn. I don't think we're going to run out of food, but I do think that our options are going to be severely limited. I'm saying, when I say that too, that we're not going to run out of food, I mean, in the United States, some people might not be able to afford to buy food. They may not have access to food. All over the world, in other countries, there are people who literally starve to death every day. So I came across a little bit self-centered with the statement that we're not going to run out of food, because there are people starving to death all over the world, despite the fact that in developed countries like the United States, we throw away approximately 50% of the food we produce. But the point being, in the midst of this NRA thing, they're talking, spreading a little more fear porn. Of course, if I were to say that, my videos could be taken down by YouTube and Facebook. U.S. aviation sector cuts more jobs amid travel meltdown. No big surprise there. Berkshire sells its entire stakes in U.S. airlines. No big surprise there. Buffett, good buddies with Billy Gates. I don't trust any of them. Warren Buffett says Berkshire sold all its airline stocks because of the coronavirus. And now, what do we got? I'll close this one out. We get into a pretty interesting story here. Pretty interesting story to close out the show today. An ex-Green Beret led a failed attempt to oust Venezuela's Maduro. I'm just going to paste that in there. This is actually a very good piece of reporting by the Military Times. Very good piece of reporting. Super in-depth. It doesn't get, definitely doesn't tell you everything, but it gives you a lot of backstory on this situation. What happened? Well, this 42-year-old guy from Florida, former Green Beret, special forces type, owns his own private security company out in Florida. He attempted to overthrow the Venezuelan government by himself with his private security firm, Silvercorp International. Who's this guy? It's this guy. What's his name? Jordan Goudreau. American citizen, 3-time Bronze Star recipient for bravery in Iraq and Afghanistan, where he served as a medic in U.S. Army Special Forces, according to 5 people who met with the former soldier. This is a good read. I'm going to paste this one in. I could go on and on about this one, but it's fascinating, very fascinating, and it's worth a read. Worth a read. Oh, I'm getting tired of talking now. Interestingly, this guy, working, apparently the way they portray this guy is that he was operating as a lone wolf, finding private investors to support his coup attempt, where he tried to get together a rebel force of about 300 defectors from the Venezuelan military and train them in Colombia, outfit them with brand new American-made weaponry, and storm the border. Basically, just go on a guerrilla rampage throughout Venezuela in an effort to take down the democratically elected Maduro government. There's Maduro right there. And who are they trying to put into power? Well, trying to put Juan Guaido, trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government again. I don't know how they haven't just locked this guy up in prison in Venezuela, but it's pretty absurd. Coming from Mint Press News, published on May 1st. I pasted this one in. Give this one a read if you're interested. It's fascinating, but I'm going to read you this one. Exactly 1 year since his audacious coup attempt failed spectacularly, self-declared Venezuelan President Juan Guaido is once again trying to overthrow the government of Nicolas Maduro. Today, I speak to the patriotic soldiers of our armed forces who rebelled against hunger and destruction and sided with the Constitution, he announced on social media last night. To the majority of patriotic soldiers who are still in each branch of the armed forces, today, more than ever, there are obvious reasons for them to act and support the formation of a national emergency government. We are going to liberate all of Venezuela. In a separate video published today, Guaido addressed Maduro directly. Every political agreement to save Venezuela begins with your departure from power, he said, demanding Maduro's immediate resignation. Guaido's call for the military to come over to his side and for Maduro to step down comes precisely 1 year after his most notable coup attempt, which primarily consisted of him standing on an overpass near a military base, claiming to have taken it over and to lead a huge rebel army. This narrative was rudely interrupted when state media rushed there and filmed the base in a state of complete normalcy. Soldiers and even commanders unaware of their supposed defeat. Guaido continued to address the nation via social media, claiming the small group of people around him in non-matching military uniforms were actual defecting soldiers. The day, like his 3 other coup attempts that year, ended in embarrassing defeat. The government brushed off the action, labeling it a small coup attempt. However, there are reasons why the U.S. might be able to force their candidate on Venezuela this time. For one, the Trump administration has frozen and transferred $342 million from the Central Bank of Venezuela's Citibank account to Guaido. That's right, the U.S. government, the Trump administration, froze funds and stole $342 million from the Central Bank of Venezuela and gave it to Guaido, who is using the Venezuelan people's collective wealth to pay his supporters $5,000 per month, an enormous salary in Venezuela. He's also offering local medical workers a stipend during the coronavirus pandemic, hoping to increase his base of support. At a time of collapsing oil prices, the country's major export, the United States has also sent warships to the region to tighten sanctions against the country, all under the guise of an anti-drug operation. Venezuela imports a great deal of food, and much of it is controlled by oligarchical corporations linked to the opposition. For example, over half of the country's flour is controlled by Empresas Polar, the country's largest private company, whose CEO, Lorenzo Mendoza, considered standing as the opposition's presidential candidate in 2018. Mendoza has regularly used his power to starve the country at times of political tension. On the other hand, Guaido is as unpopular as he has ever been inside the country, even among the opposition, who removed him from his post as head of the National Assembly in January. His own political party, Voluntad Popular, also expelled him from their ranks. Opposition presidential candidate in 2018, Henry Falcón, recently attacked Guaido's credibility, asking if oil company Citgo is truly in his hands. Why is there a gasoline shortage in the country? Isn't that absurd? Venezuela has got huge oil reserves, yet they have a gasoline shortage. Why is that? The most recent polls show Guaido has a 10% approval rating and a 69% disapproval rating. He's even unpopular among his own fellow coup plotters. After a failed attempt in January 2019, his co-conspirators fled to the U.S. thinking they would be given a hero's welcome. Instead, they have spent over a year in an ICE concentration camp for crossing the border illegally. The highest ranking member of the group told reporters that they feel abandoned by Guaido. So there you go. I'll paste that one in there. That's a good read. Thank you, Mint Press News, for speaking up, sharing some perspective, and getting us thinking. Again, you got to take it all with a grain of salt. Interestingly, it's funny, guys like David Icke, guys like, Alex Jones. I don't like Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones is controlled opposition. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. But, people get deplatformed all the time. Pages like the Anti-Media, Carrie Wedler's page. Carrie Wedler, editor-in-chief of the Anti-Media. Brilliant, beautiful woman, Carrie Wedler. Censored, deplatformed. Well, one guy who hasn't been deplatformed is Juan Guaido, despite the fact that he is literally calling for the violent overthrow of a democratically elected government in an imperiled and struggling South American country. Twitter gives him the blue check mark by his name. 2.5 million followers. What's this guy doing? Well, he is a U.S. government-supported political plant who's got a 10% approval rate in the country and claims to be the president of a country where he was never elected to be the president. And, I guess Juan Guaido has as much right to free speech as Bill Gates and Tony Fauci and you and me and everybody else, even though Juan Guaido, like Bill Gates and Tony Fauci, are totally, completely, utterly, and extremely dangerously full of shit. That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your boy Max Mogren, live for you here in beautiful Up Wyoming. Remember, mainstream media is specifically designed to distract us, divide us, deceive us, deter us from taking positive action, depress the living shit out of us, and, make us believe that a virus with a 99+% survival rate, a coronavirus, a virus similar to the common cold or the flu, perhaps no more deadly, is justification to shut down the entire planet, implement a state of medical martial law, crash the global economy, misallocate and funnel billions, if not trillions of dollars into the hands of people that already have the vast majority of the money on the planet, implement a global surveillance state, push for mandatory vaccines and all this bullshit. I respect people's right to full free speech, even though, some of them are terrorist organizations. And I just wish that our dear friends in Silicon Valley, the techno-fascist elites, would do the same for all of us. You'll have a great day. I love all y'all. I'll be back live with you real soon. Keep waking up, keep looking up, keep speaking up, and keep throwing up all that bullshit that has been crammed down your throat for so long. Take it easy. One love. Peace.